All right, so I wanted to talk a little bit today about what you need to bring as far as rods, reels, and bags when packing for a trip to Cuba. Cuba is a destination where no gear is available when you get there, so it's important that you bring absolutely everything with you, everything you think you might need from a fishing standpoint. And I like to recommend that if you can, and you have the luxury of having enough gear to be able to facilitate, I actually love having at least 4 rods, and that lineup is an 8-weight for bonefish, a 9-weight for permit, and then 2 heavier weight rods. So if you own a 10 and an 11 or an 11 and a 12, bring 2 heavier weight rods, the idea being that you're prepared for tarpon. And what I do upon arrival, depending upon the season and where I'm going, when I get there is I say, hey, what are you seeing in the fishery? I've got a 10 and an 11, for example. Which rod should I rig for tarpon based on what you're seeing in the fishery at this time? And then the odd man out, sort of that leftover rod, I'll typically rig for barracuda. As far as reels go for Cuba, I have the luxury of having too many reels, or maybe that's a problem, I don't know. But I make sure to have a well-balanced reel for my bonefish rod. That's been really important for me, and I've gone through a number of different reels. My personal favorite right now is a Hatch 7 Plus for my bonefish setup. I'm pretty excited about my latest addition, a Siegler for my 9. This is a powerful enough reel that I can bump this up to a 10, so for permit or potentially for tarpon. And then I also have a bunch of these Nautilus reels. These are essentially a 9-10, so they can work for both permit and for heavier weighted fish. So, I rig this. Usually I have a floating line, and then I also bring one with an intermediate line. The nice thing about having 2 lines there is if I end up in a situation where the fish are deeper down and I need to get a little bit deeper in the water column, then I have my intermediate line on a second reel. And then, I also have a big arbor reel that's typically set up for tarpon as well. When I first rig for my lines for fishing in Cuba, I make sure that I've got all floating. My 8 is going to be a floater, my 9-weight is going to be a floater, and my tarpon setup is going to be a floater. I then, if I have the luxury of either having a second reel or a second spool, will put an intermediate line on that so that I can capitalize on those opportunities when the fish are a little bit lower down in the water column. But again, you don't have to go out and buy all these new reels, but it's great to make sure that you've got a reel that matches every single one of your sticks in your bag. And then I also have the luxury of being able to have enough rods so that I have a spare rod. If you break a rod in Cuba, there's no backup. So definitely, it happens. We break rods all the time. I try to pack as many rods as possible down there, and I like to have a backup specifically for those tarpon rods. They tend to be the ones that blow up or break or something goes wrong with. So it's not a bad idea to have a spare rod if you can. But at a minimum, just to review, 8 for bonefish, 9 for permit, 10 or 11. Bring 2 of those heavier weight rods and rig those accordingly for tarpon and potentially for barracuda or some other sort of toothy critter that you may be interested in targeting. So when I'm packing all of this great gear to go down to Cuba, I actually have brought in my own personal kit today so that we can talk about the different options. But I personally use one of these fish pond bags. There's lots of different options. There's Orvis makes a similar bag, and each has their own iteration and the way that they work. This one has a specific spot up top to put your rods, and every single one of them has different features. But I load all of my reels in their little neoprene sleeves that they come with. And I will actually keep these neoprene sleeves around my reels once I actually get them on my rods as well, so that when they're bouncing around in the boat, attached to the rods, the reels are protected. So I just go ahead and throw that whole 9 with the lines all set on them, and I put as many as I can in here, and then I just take my rods in their rod sleeves, I take them out of the tubes, and I will stack them nicely in here. If I have a little bit of extra space in here, I'll actually take my sun hoodie, maybe a couple buffs, and just pad this so they're not really moving around. One thing that's really important to consider when you're traveling to Cuba is that you're gonna have to check your rods and your reels on departure. It's a regulation that you can't get around, so you wanna pack accordingly, whether it's using one of these rod holders that you can actually roll up, fit a bunch of rods in, roll up, and put inside your bigger bag, that's your check luggage, on departure, or packing this up, zipping it up, and making sure you've got a travel lock. You know, just be prepared to check these bags upon departure. You can always pick them up when you get back into the US and then hand carry them or carry them as a carry-on domestically. It's not a problem. But it's a good idea to make sure that that bag locks, if at all possible, or fits inside your larger bag, so that you can check it if need be.